There are a few non-negotiables when we are dealing with angles. And I would say if you are a middle school student or a high school student, if you are taking the SHSAT, the SAT, the ACT, I want you to at least know these three things, okay? So here we go. The first thing is that the interior angles of a triangle are always going to measure 180 degrees when I find the sum, when I add them all up. And oftentimes we use this information to find missing angles. So knowing this fact is really important. Okay, the second thing, there are linear pairs which are created on straight lines. So as you can see here, we have a straight line and then another ray that is coming from that line. Now they could also be created by two intersecting lines. But what we get is two angles that are called a linear pair. And the measure of these two angles, when we find the sum, they will always be 180 degrees. Another name for this, you might be familiar with the term supplementary. They are known as supplementary angles, and these are specific supplementary angles because they are a linear pair. Again, we use this information to find missing angles, and it'll help us know things about other angles in our angle pair relationships within other pictures or models that we are dealing with. Thing that we can see are a pair of intersecting lines, and intersecting lines will always form four angles. Now, the ones that are across from one another are always going to be equal in measure. So we call these angles vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent, which means that they are equal to each other. As you can also see, when we have our intersecting lines, they also form those linear pairs that we were talking about before. So any of the angles that are on the straight line will sum to 180. And as a last fact, all four angles in this little circle will sum to 360 degrees, which is also the measure of a circle. All right, so we are going to get into using some of these facts in a geometry problem that I will show you next. We're going to do number 58 here, which uses some of the information that I just discussed, plus a few other things. So we need to find the measure of angle X. That's this angle on the outside here. Now, I didn't just talk with you about parallelograms, but just so that we know, parallelogram is a type of quadrilateral in which the opposite sides are both congruent and parallel. Also, the opposite angles are also going to be equal in measure, which is helpful information. So they give us two angle measures, right? They give us over here this exterior angle of 72, and then they also give us this square. This means that we have a 90-degree angle over here, which is going to be helpful. But I'm going to start down here because if I know that this is 72, we talked about before that these two angle measures are a linear pair. So what do they sum to? 180 degrees. So when I do 180 minus 72, I get 108, which is the missing angle over here. Now, in a parallelogram, like I said before, opposite angles are congruent. Also, the angles that are next to each other, those are going to be supplementary. So basically, if this is 108, that means that this has to be 72 because these two need to add up to 180, but I don't really need that. I know that angle Q is going to be equal to 108 because it is the same measure as the angle PSR. Okay, so now what I notice is I've got almost everything that I need. This area over here, these three angles, X, the 90 degrees, and Q, they have to sum to 360 degrees. So I already know that when I do 108 plus 90, I get 198. Those are these two right here. And then x is just going to be whatever is left over to get me to 360. So I'm going to subtract 360 minus 198. If you want to do this in your head, totally fine. Of course, 10 minus 8 is 2. 15, 6, 2, 162 degrees. So the measure of angle x is 162 degrees. If I had a little extra time on my test, I'd probably just add these two angles together to make sure that I did the subtraction correctly, because sometimes, we can make mistakes there. And yeah, that gives me 360. All right, so we needed to know that we had a linear pair. We also needed to know that this was 90 degrees. We needed to know that these two angles were equal. And then lastly, we needed to know that all of those angles sum to 180. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Please subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.